Power is not just about force, it's about foresight. Those who can see one move ahead survive. Those who can see 10 control the board. Sun Tzu understood this better than anyone. In The Art of War, he wasn't only writing about armies or battlefields, he was teaching the art of human prediction. Every relationship, negotiation, and rivalry is a psychological chess match. The question is, do you play reactively, or do you anticipate the board before the other player even makes a move? To predict people's moves before they act, you must understand that human behavior isn't random. It follows patterns, emotional, logical, and instinctive. What most people call intuition is really an accumulation of pattern recognition. The more deeply you study those around you, the clearer their invisible routines become. You start to see what drives them: fear, desire, pride, or insecurity. Once you know their fuel, you know their next direction. Sun Tzu wrote, "Know your enemy and know yourself, and you need not fear the result of 100 battles." This channel reveals the hidden laws of strategy and control. Subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. But modern minds often misunderstand this. Knowing your enemy doesn't mean memorizing their facts. It means mapping their psychology. It means knowing what kind of insult makes them lose composure, what kind of silence makes them anxious, what kind of praise makes them drop their guard. Every person has a mental pattern, a set of predictable responses triggered by emotion. The first law of psychological chess is observation without interference. Most people are too eager to speak, to act, to impose their presence. The wise strategist stays still. They let silence reveal the other person. In that silence, people expose their motives through the words they choose, the tone they use, the rhythm of their breathing. Silence is the mirror where truth reflects itself. The impatient talk, the powerful watch. In business meetings, in conflicts, or even in personal arguments, watch how quickly someone tries to fill the silence. The more they rush to explain themselves, the more uncertain they are. The more they project confidence, the more fragile that confidence tends to be. People constantly reveal what they want to hide, if you know what to look for. The second law is anticipation through contradiction. To predict someone's move, you must think in opposites. If someone tries too hard to appear indifferent, it's because they care deeply. If they overemphasize loyalty, they may already be considering betrayal. When a person insists on control, it's because they feel chaos inside. Human beings rarely express their true state directly. They express its shadow. The art lies in reading the reflection instead of the image. This is how Sun Tzu trained his generals, to see not the soldier's armor, but the trembling of the hand holding the sword, to see not the banner of victory, but the hesitation before the charge. You must learn to read hesitation, tone, delay, and microexpression as moves in a larger game. Every reaction is a signal. The third law, neutralize emotion to reveal intention.
Emotion is fog.
When you are emotional, you become predictable. When others are emotional, they become transparent. Control your inner storm, and you will see clearly into others' chaos. In any confrontation, your calmness is a psychological weapon. The more still you appear, the more your opponent fills the silence with clues. They mistake your calm for weakness, and in their rush to exploit it, they reveal their plan. A man once asked a strategist, "How do I know what my rival will do next?" The strategist replied, "Make him believe you don't care." Indifference provokes action. When people feel unseen or unacknowledged, they act impulsively to prove their presence. They speak more, explain more, expose more. You don't predict their next move, you create the conditions that force them to show it. Sun Tzu's psychological chess is not about controlling others. It's about controlling the environment in which others reveal themselves. Every word, gesture, or silence is a move on the board. The one who dictates the pace of the game dictates its outcome. Consider how powerful leaders move. They do not react quickly. They give time for others to show their cards. They use patience as a weapon. In their stillness, everyone else begins to move, nervously, anxiously, revealing patterns. The room bends around the one who remains unmoved. In this kind of war, victory is not measured by destruction, but by understanding. When you know what someone will do before they do it, you don't need to fight them. You only need to guide them with subtle nudges, questions, and pauses that shape their path without them realizing it. This is not manipulation. It's psychological awareness. Manipulation seeks control through deceit. Awareness seeks control through clarity. The more you understand this, the more predictable the world becomes. The colleague who interrupts in meetings, the friend who always apologizes too much, the rival who talks about loyalty. Each reveals their pattern. Each shows a glimpse of their next move. You don't need to confront them. You just need to position yourself where their habits serve your strategy. There's a saying among chess masters: the game is won in the opponent's mind long before the final move. The same applies to life. When you can predict human behavior, you no longer fear uncertainty. You create it for others. Sun Tzu taught that the highest form of warfare is to subdue the enemy without fighting. In the psychological realm, this means leading others to defeat themselves through overreaction, misjudgment, or pride. Your power lies in their lack of awareness. Let's take an example. Imagine a negotiator who speaks little, observes deeply, and never shows excitement at an offer. The other side grows uneasy. They interpret his silence as dissatisfaction. They sweeten the deal, lower their guard, and over-explain their reasoning. The negotiator wins not because he was clever, but because he allowed the other person's psychology to unfold. He created the silence in which the truth revealed itself. This is the essence of prediction. Not foreseeing the future, but recognizing the inevitable. People act out of need. Every action is a compensation for something they lack: validation, safety, recognition, or control. Once you identify that lack, you can map the trajectory of their decisions. The proud man will always choose visibility over wisdom. The insecure will seek validation, even if it costs them everything. The manipulator will overplay subtlety until it exposes itself. The fearful will retreat before they strike. You must become fluent in these patterns, as a chess player becomes fluent in opening sequences. The board may change, but the psychology does not. The fourth law of prediction is the mirror strategy. People reveal themselves most clearly when they see themselves reflected. By mirroring tone, posture, or emotional state, you encourage them to project more. When someone feels understood, they relax. And in that relaxation, their mask slips. The secret is to mirror without imitation, to reflect their rhythm without losing your control. You become the calm surface that reveals their shape. Sun Tzu would say, "Appear as you are not. To understand others, sometimes you must disappear within them. Take on their tempo, their language, their perspective, not to imitate but to anticipate. When you think as they think, you'll see the move before they make it." Every person carries within them a predictable sequence, a hidden logic guiding their choices. You only need to uncover the first step, and the rest will follow. If someone's pride drives them, they will defend it to the end. If someone fears rejection, they will avoid confrontation even when they should fight. Once you spot the first vulnerability, you can follow the trail to their final decision. Prediction, therefore, is not mysticism. It's pattern literacy. It's emotional intelligence sharpened into strategic vision. To master the skill, you must detach yourself from your own emotions long enough to observe others without judgment. You must learn to enjoy the silence between words, the space between reactions. Because that space, that gap of stillness, is where control lives. The world will call this manipulation, but in truth, it's awareness. Those who live unconsciously are controlled by impulses. Those who live consciously control outcomes. In the next stage of understanding, you'll see how to turn observation into influence, how to guide people's moves by subtle psychological pressure, how to shift their emotional states without a word, how to master the board without appearing to play. For now, remember this: the real strategist never plays the game the crowd sees. He plays the one hidden beneath the invisible chess of the mind. The mind, when untrained, is noisy. It reacts, assumes, rushes to conclusions. But the mind trained in the art of psychological chess becomes a mirror, silent, still, and deadly accurate. When Sun Tzu spoke of knowing the enemy, he didn't mean collecting surface facts. He meant dissolving the illusion of separation until your perception of others becomes as instinctive as your perception of yourself. To predict people's moves, you must first remove the noise that prevents you from seeing their patterns. Every human being operates under a hierarchy of motives. Beneath all actions lie emotional currencies: approval, security, dominance, pleasure, belonging. People trade these as unconsciously as they breathe. Once you learn to identify which currency drives someone, you can trace every move they make. The mistake most make is assuming logic directs decisions. It doesn't. Logic is the servant of emotion. The mind constructs rationalizations for what the heart already decided. Sun Tzu's generals knew that to predict the next move of a rival commander, they had to study not his army, but his temperament. Does he crave recognition? Then he will act rashly when challenged publicly. Does he fear embarrassment? Then he will hesitate when pressured. Does he value peace over victory? Then you can provoke him into concessions disguised as diplomacy. Once you identify the dominant emotion, you've already mapped the battlefield. To see what others will do, learn to read what they cannot hide. Their micro-expressions, tone shifts, gestures under stress. The face may lie, but the muscles tell the truth. The hand gripping the table a second too long, the blink that interrupts a sentence, the voice that rises to justify itself. These are fragments of the inner landscape. People rarely realize how loud their unconscious signals are. The one who listens deeply enough can hear entire strategies hidden in a sigh. But prediction without patience is blindness. The impatient strategist sees half the truth and acts prematurely, revealing his own plan. The master observes longer than comfort allows. He allows tension to build, words to overlap, silence to sting. It's in that discomfort that people expose the truth. Patience is not the absence of movement, it is the gathering of invisible data. The art of psychological anticipation. The next principle is invisible influence. Once you can predict, you can guide. But to guide, you must remain unseen. The power of influence lies in subtlety. When people believe they've reached a conclusion by themselves, they defend it with conviction. Influence, then, is not about commanding, it's about constructing invisible corridors that lead others to where you need them to go. This is why Sun Tzu warned against direct confrontation. To subdue the enemy without fighting is the acme of skill. In psychological terms, it means to plant ideas, not impose them. To hint, not demand. When you understand the desires and fears that drive people, you can frame choices in ways that align with their self-image. They will move as you expect because they believe they are acting freely. Imagine a leader who wants a stubborn general to retreat from a dangerous campaign. If he orders it, pride will resist. If he asks directly, ego will defend itself. But if he praises the general's strategic insight and subtly mentions that only a commander with true foresight would preserve his forces for a decisive moment, he has already planted the seed. The general's pride aligns with the retreat. The move becomes predictable because the emotion guiding it was engineered. Predicting human behavior is not reading minds, it's reading motivations. The more clearly you see what people need to believe about themselves, the more predictable they become. The generous man needs to feel noble. The intelligent needs to feel superior. The victim needs to feel wronged. These identities form cages that limit free will. Once you know which cage they live in, you know how they'll move within it. But mastery requires more than reading others. It demands controlling your own projection. You must become unreadable. If others cannot anticipate your reactions, they cannot control the board. Never show predictable emotion. Alternate warmth with detachment. Surprise with silence when words are expected, and with calm when anger is provoked. The more unpredictable your surface, the clearer your vision beneath it. In Sun Tzu's framework, the self is also terrain. You are both player and field. To control the game, you must make your own emotions invisible, your expressions minimal, your presence stable. People will reveal themselves to fill your stillness. The strategist uses invisibility not as absence, but as presence so deep it absorbs attention. Others try to read you and fail. In their confusion, they expose themselves. The greatest masters of prediction often appear humble, quiet, and unassuming. Their power lies in what they do not react to. They allow insults to pass, flattery to fade, chaos to swirl without movement. Inside, their mind is cataloging every pattern, every inconsistency, every unguarded phrase. The silent observer sees more in 5 minutes than the loud one sees in 5 years. To train this level of awareness, practice detachment in ordinary life. When someone argues, observe their rhythm instead of responding. When someone flatters you, analyze what they want. When someone overshares, map their insecurity. When you speak, speak deliberately. Each pause you take is an opportunity for others to reveal what you don't need to ask. Over time, your intuition becomes precision. You stop guessing, you start knowing. Now, imagine a world where this perception is second nature. You walk into a negotiation, and within minutes, you know who's hiding fear, who's overcompensating, who's desperate for validation. You adjust your tone accordingly. You disarm tension before it forms. You extract truth without force. The game becomes effortless. You no longer need to predict because everything becomes obvious. Sun Tzu's psychological chess teaches not only foresight but harmony. When you see deeply into others, judgment disappears. You stop taking offense because you understand cause. You stop fearing betrayal because you can see it forming. You stop chasing approval because you recognize it as a weapon. With clarity comes peace, and peace is the ultimate strategic position. The untrained mind reacts. The trained mind observes. The mastermind orchestrates. And the enlightened strategist? He sees that control and prediction are the same thing, understanding. When you understand the currents beneath behavior, life stops being random. Every person becomes an open book, every move a line in a pattern you already recognize. This is Sun Tzu's true legacy. Not war, but awareness. He taught that the battlefield begins in the mind, long before swords are drawn or words are spoken. Predicting others, therefore, begins with conquering yourself. The greatest illusion in the world is randomness. People believe that chaos rules human behavior, that actions are unpredictable, that fate is arbitrary. But to the mind that sees clearly, chaos is only order too complex for the untrained eye. Sun Tzu's genius was not just in strategy, it was in perception. He knew that the enemy, the battlefield, and fate itself could be read like a language. Every hesitation, every overreaction, every silence, it all speaks. Those who listen beyond words win without struggle. But to reach that level, one must transcend the ego. Ego blinds prediction because it interprets, judges, and personalizes everything it observes. When you believe that others act against you, you can't see that they're simply acting according to themselves. The true strategist sees no enemies, only human patterns unfolding. He does not fight people, he reads them. He does not take offense, he takes data. Imagine two warriors facing each other. One burns with emotion, eager to strike. The other stands still, breathing, watching. The emotional one believes he's in control because he's ready. But readiness driven by emotion is weakness disguised as strength. The calm one has already won. Not because he will strike first, but because he already knows where the other will strike. He has observed his rhythm, his breath, the tilt of his shoulders. His prediction is not intuition, it's clarity. Sun Tzu once said, "The wise warrior avoids the battle." In psychological chess, avoidance doesn't mean retreat. It means dominance through foresight, Why fight an opponent who can be guided into defeating himself? The master never resists directly. He redirects energy. If someone is arrogant, he lets that arrogance overextend. If someone is deceitful, he gives them rope to hang themselves. Every emotion becomes a lever when you know its origin. To predict behavior, you must learn emotional cause and effect. Every feeling generates a need, and every need leads to predictable action. Fear causes retreat. Pride seeks validation. Guilt looks for punishment. Love craves recognition. Map these emotional circuits, and you will know where every conversation, argument, or decision is headed long before others do. Let's illustrate this with a simple example. A man wants approval from his peers. When criticized, he overreacts defensively. When praised, he becomes generous. If you understand this pattern, you can direct his behavior effortlessly. You can offer mild disapproval to trigger urgency or subtle praise to extract cooperation. He believes he's acting freely, but he's only responding to emotional design. Most people live inside this invisible code. The few who can read it rule quietly. Prediction, then, is not mind-reading, it's emotional arithmetic. But mastery of this art demands one final step: self-erasure. You must become invisible. Not literally, but psychologically. The more people try to read you and fail, the more power you gain. Because when people can't anticipate your reaction, they lose strategic balance. Their moves become erratic. Their confidence weakens. They reveal too much because uncertainty terrifies them. This is why Sun Tzu advised to be formless, like water. Water takes the shape of its container. It adapts without effort. When you adopt this mentality, you become unpredictable yet precise. You stop clinging to identity, and in doing so, you gain mastery over perception itself. People cannot read what has no fixed shape. Your calm, your silence, your shifts of tone, they all become mirrors reflecting others back to themselves. You start to see that most people don't act from free will. They act from programming patterns built from childhood, repetition, trauma, and culture. They say what they were taught to say, desire what others desired, defend what they were told to value. And yet, every program follows predictable steps. The strategist doesn't despise this. He observes it, understands it, and navigates through it. He learns that power doesn't require domination. It requires comprehension. When you reach this state of awareness, you begin to feel people's moves before they happen. You sense hesitation in their words, the faint tremor of doubt in their smiles. You anticipate betrayal not as paranoia, but as recognition, like hearing a familiar melody start to play again. You see anger forming before it's expressed, disappointment rising before it's admitted. You begin to live a few seconds ahead of everyone else. That's what Sun Tzu meant by victory belongs to those who can foresee. The mind that can see a few seconds ahead of others controls time itself. In arguments, it never needs to shout. In negotiations, it never needs to rush. In relationships, it never feels surprised. The power of prediction is serenity. You cease being a piece on the board, you become the board itself. But foresight is dangerous without discipline. Once you can predict, the temptation is to manipulate. You'll see how easy it is to move people, how fragile their convictions are, how desperately they cling to comfort. You could control them, bend them, make them obey. Yet Sun Tzu warned, "He who knows when to fight and when not to fight will be victorious." The true master uses prediction for alignment, not exploitation. He shapes reality without corrupting it. This is where ethics and strategy intersect. To play psychological chess honorably is to guide others toward outcomes that serve truth, not vanity. When you know someone's weakness, protect it. When you sense their fear, calm it. When you detect deceit, expose it gently. Power without morality becomes tyranny, and tyranny always self-destructs, because it cannot predict the loyalty it destroys. The strategist's purpose is not to dominate minds, but to elevate understanding, to teach others to see the patterns that imprison them. When you know someone's inner motives, you can free them from reacting blindly. You can end unnecessary conflict by exposing its emotional root. That is the highest form of victory, transformation, not humiliation. Sun Tzu's ultimate lesson was not control, but harmony through awareness. He believed that when you see the hidden logic beneath behavior, compassion becomes a byproduct of clarity. You stop despising people for their weaknesses because you see the mechanism behind them. You recognize yourself in their patterns. The more you understand others, the less you need to control them. Because prediction is not dominance, it's understanding time before it unfolds. To live this way, practice 3 disciplines. 1. Radical observation. Watch everything, not to judge but to decode. When someone speaks, focus less on the words and more on rhythm, tone, and emotion. Words are conscious. Tone is unconscious. Tone reveals intent. Observe posture, breathing, micro-movements. See the invisible communication. The more you train your perception, the more your mind becomes predictive by default. 2. Emotional neutrality. Detach from personal bias. Don't want people to act a certain way. Expect them to act according to who they are. Desire clouds foresight. Stay neutral. Whether someone loves or hates you, it tells you the same thing, what they need to feel. Their behavior is never about you. It's about their internal world. Remember that, and you'll never take offense again. 3. Controlled expression. Speak and act with precision. The fewer signals you send, the less information others can use against you. Control your face, your timing, your breathing. The more disciplined your outer expression, the sharper your inner awareness becomes. When your behavior is stable, others reveal themselves in contrast. Your silence becomes their confession. When you master these disciplines, you become like the grandmaster in chess, already 10 moves ahead, but pretending to think. Every smile, pause, or phrase is deliberate. Others believe they are leading. In truth, they are being guided. Yet they feel no manipulation, because your guidance aligns with their needs. This is invisible power, the highest form of mastery. You begin to sense how every event unfolds according to laws. People who appear unpredictable are simply complex, not chaotic. Their history is their blueprint. Once you read it, you can see every outcome as clearly as a map. You start to understand why Sun Tzu valued deception, not as lies but as layers of perception. When he said, "Appear weak when you are strong and strong when you are weak," he wasn't promoting falsehood, he was teaching adaptability. The strategist shifts his expression to create contrast, to control rhythm. If others believe they understand him, they relax. And when they relax, their pattern reveals itself fully. Even in modern life, these principles remain unchanged. At work, you can read ambition disguised as collaboration. In relationships, you can sense insecurity disguised as confidence. In leadership, you can foresee collapse disguised as overexcitement. You become fluent in the hidden dialect of human emotion. Eventually, you see that the game isn't about others, it's about you. Every move you predict in someone else reflects something unresolved within yourself. The arrogance you detect in others might mirror your old wounds. The fear you anticipate in them might still exist in you. To truly master prediction, you must clean your own mirror. Only a still mind can reflect the truth clearly. That's why the last law of psychological chess is inner silence. When the mind stops grasping for control, perception expands. You stop trying to win and start seeing. You become effortless, fluid, invisible. People trust you without knowing why. They confide, reveal, and follow naturally. You no longer manipulate, you magnetize. And from that silence comes the rarest power of all, foresight born of peace. You no longer predict to protect yourself. You predict to maintain harmony. You anticipate so that conflict never needs to begin. You intervene subtly, guide gently, act precisely. That is Sun Tzu's final victory. Mastery not through domination, but through clarity so profound that war itself becomes unnecessary. Because when you can read the mind, you no longer need to fight it. You stand calm in the storm, unmoved as others rush. You see every gesture, every hesitation, every word as part of the same pattern, humanity trying to understand itself. You don't rush to control. You watch, and through watching, you already control. That is the essence of psychological chess. That is how to predict people's moves before they act. And remember, the greatest strategist wins not by knowing others, but by knowing himself so completely that no one else's actions can surprise him. If this story gave you clarity, share it with someone who's trying to master their own mind. And tell me in the comments, what patterns will you start to see differently from now on?